My husband invited me to an important business dinner with a potential Japanese partner, and I did exactly what he expected from me, smiled, nodded politely, and played the part of the quiet, decorative wife. I folded my hands on my lap, tilted my head at the right angles, and pretended to be pleasantly clueless about everything beyond the surface. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that I understood every single word of Japanese, every sentence, every tone shift, every insult disguised behind polite phrasing. And that night, the words I heard redefined my entire reality. But long before that dinner, there was the life I thought I had. My name is Sarah, and for 12 long years, I genuinely believed I was living inside a marriage that was stable, if not extraordinary. Not perfect, not passionate anymore, but calm, predictable. A routine I had convinced myself was normal. David, my husband, was a senior manager at a well-established Bay Area tech company. Ambitious, focused, always chasing the next milestone. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a smaller firm. Nothing glamorous, but fulfilling in a quiet way. Our life was clean, symmetrical, and deceptively peaceful. Our Mountain View townhouse was always tidy, our holiday pictures always smiling, and our dinner table conversations always civilized and polite. Somewhere along the years, the David I married began dissolving into someone unrecognizable. He became busier, more important, or so he said. Work trips multiplied, late nights increased, and his conversations gradually shifted from affectionate to transactional. Days blurred into a mechanical rhythm. Are you picking up the dry cleaning? Did you schedule the lawn care? Remember the Johnsons on Saturday? I found myself orbiting around his convenience, adjusting my schedule, softening my voice, reducing my needs to fit into the neat little box of a supportive wife who asked for nothing. He stopped noticing the loneliness that wrapped around me every evening while he sat locked in his home office, tapping away at his keyboard like I didn't exist. I stopped noticing when I began shrinking. 18 months before that dinner, something changed. Not in my marriage, not yet, but in me. One night while David slept beside me, snoring loud enough to rattle the headboard, a random ad appeared on my phone. Learn Japanese, free trial. I tapped it without thinking. A mindless impulse. But the hiragana symbols looked familiar, like echoes of a life I once dreamed of. I had taken a semester of Japanese in college, back when my ambitions were still alive, before I tucked them away behind the glossy smile of a dutiful wife. That night, curiosity turned into a spark. I opened the lessons just for fun. By the next week, I was studying daily. David never noticed. Or maybe he noticed but didn't care, because he never asked what I was doing when I sat in the kitchen with earbuds in, whispering conjugations or practicing pronunciation. A long time ago, he'd made me feel foolish for wanting to take a photography class, so I learned not to share my interests. Silence was easier. My Japanese lessons became my secret refuge. Slowly, the language unfolded in my mind like an elegant puzzle, its structure, its rhythm, its layers of politeness and meaning. I loved it. I soaked it in like I had been starving for years. Within months, I was devouring dramas without subtitles, swapping jokes with tutors online, reading simple novels. I didn't just learn Japanese, I found myself again in the process. Then came the evening David walked in early, excited about his upcoming meeting with a Japanese CEO. He told me with a proud little smirk that I needed to join the dinner. Not because he wanted my company or valued my presence, but because it looks more respectable. He told me exactly what to wear, exactly how to behave, exactly how not to speak. His tone made it clear. I was a prop, not a partner. When he casually bragged about how fluent he was in Japanese, I kept chopping vegetables and pretended not to notice the sting of irony. He never asked, even once, if I spoke the language. Why would he? He stopped seeing me as an individual a long time ago. That's when a cold curiosity sparked inside me. If he felt so comfortable speaking freely in front of me in a language he believed I didn't understand, what else did he say when he thought I wasn't listening? The night of the dinner arrived. I wore the navy dress he demanded, pinned my hair neatly, and perfected a serene expression. We reached the restaurant early. He lectured me in the car about smiling more and speaking less. I nodded, storing every word like ammunition. Inside the elegant Japanese restaurant, I bowed politely to Mr. Tanaka and let David take the lead. The conversation started in English, but soon flowed smoothly into Japanese. I sipped my water, appearing clueless while understanding every single word. David spoke with a confidence I hadn't heard in years, but beneath that polished tone was arrogance, sharp, swollen, ugly. He exaggerated his achievements, boasted strategically, inflated his contributions at work. But then the conversation pivoted. Tanaka politely asked what I worked in. Before I could pretend to not understand, David answered for me in Japanese, dismissing my 15-year career as a little hobby to keep me occupied. I held my smile while something inside me cracked, but that was nothing compared to what came next. In Japanese, David casually revealed he was secretly moving money into offshore accounts. He spoke of flexibility and preparing for future transitions without involving me. My heart froze. And then, with a laugh that curdled my blood, he mentioned Jennifer, his affair of 6 months. He described her as ambitious, exciting, and a better match for his world. He said I was simple, unambitious, convenient, someone who didn't demand much. Someone who looked good at dinners and stayed out of the way. A decorative wife. A silent background piece. I sat there smiling like a well-trained mannequin, while my life shattered behind my ribs. The moment her trembling voice fell silent, the room changed. Not because anything moved, but because I finally understood the full depth of the trap they had built around her. A web of calculated cruelty, stitched together with lies, manipulation, and a confidence so shameless that it could only come from people who believed they were untouchable. Her husband's family had spent months destroying her reputation, piece by poisonous piece. Every gesture of kindness she offered, they twisted. Every mistake, they exaggerated. Every cry for help, they silenced. And yet, she had survived it all. But survival was not victory. Not yet. She sat on the edge of her bed, eyes swollen, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. I watched her inhale deeply, as if the air itself weighed several kilos. She wasn't crying anymore. She was remembering. Replaying every insult, every betrayal, every moment where she was treated as less than human. Her voice quivered, but her words were steady. I did everything for them, everything. And they treated me like I was an inconvenience they needed to erase. The room sank into silence. Then she did something unexpected. She reached for the bundle of papers, the ones she had hidden for months, and placed them in front of me. Not with fear. With purpose. These are my proof. I opened the file, page by page, and it felt like lifting stones from a grave. Bank statements. Voice recordings. Medical reports. Screenshots of messages, dripping with threats and intent. Receipts of money taken without consent. Hospital prescriptions they forced her to hide. She had collected everything quietly. Silently. Strategically. While they believed she was broken, she had been preparing. Her courage wasn't loud. It was patient. The truth lay in my hands, heavy, sharp, undeniable. You were waiting for the right moment, I said softly. No, she corrected. I was waiting for the moment I stopped being afraid. Outside the window, the world went about its business. Inside the room, something else was happening, a shift. A slow, powerful rise of strength that had been buried, but never destroyed. She took another deep breath, calmer now, and looked me straight in the eye. Help me end this, not with revenge, with justice. And in her voice, I heard it. A kind of steel that only comes from being pushed too far for too long. I nodded. Not because I pitied her, but because I recognized something unmistakable. She was done being the victim. And just like that, the story changed direction. Her story was no longer about suffering. It was about reclaiming power. But justice is never simple. Justice is not a door you open. It is a battlefield you prepare for. And the people who had wronged her were clever, ruthless, and extremely confident that she would never fight back. They had no idea their immunity was about to end. That night, she didn't sleep. Not because she was terrified, but because she was planning. Every detail she had held inside for years poured out like a confession, but without guilt. She was not confessing sins, she was documenting crimes. And I watched her transform. The trembling hands grew steady. The breaking voice became firm. The tears dried, replaced by clarity. It was no longer a story of desperation. It was a declaration of war. But not the kind fought with fists, shouting, or violence. A war fought in silence. With evidence. With strategy. With law. With patience sharper than any weapon. By sunrise, we had a plan. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. Because the best revenge is not Ray. It is calm, calculated dismantling. She closed the file, placed her hand over it, and whispered, "For the first time, I'm not scared of them. They should be scared of me." And somewhere, deep in the shadows of their arrogance, a shift had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The opening move was ready. The story was finally stepping into its second phase. No more tears. No more begging. No more enduring. The hunt for justice had officially begun. And the predators were about to learn what it feels like to become the prey. The first blow to their empire of arrogance came quietly, so quietly that not a single person in that house realized what was unfolding. Silence became her greatest weapon, and patience her sharpest blade. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the complaint she had drafted with trembling but determined hands was submitted online. Digital, time-stamped, irreversible. The moment it was uploaded, it no longer belonged to secrecy. It belonged to the law. And the same people who mocked her for being weak had unknowingly given her the strongest evidence simply by believing she would never dare. I watched her take a deep breath after pressing the final button. No tears. No shaking. No hesitation. Just a long, slow exhale, the kind that comes when chains finally loosen. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we wait, not for mercy, not for sympathy, we wait for consequences." And consequences were already on their way. By noon, call records had been pulled. By evening, bank transfers were flagged. By night, a quiet internal investigation began, the kind that doesn't knock, doesn't warn, doesn't hesitate. Meanwhile, in that suffocating house, where they sat gossiping and plotting, everything continued as usual. Her husband barked orders like a king. Her mother-in-law strutted around like a self-appointed queen. Her father-in-law pretended he was the wisest man alive. And her sister-in-law, always hungry for drama, kept inventing new lies just to feel relevant. Not one of them had the slightest idea that every word they said, every step they took, every call they made was now being recorded, tracked, and compared to the very evidence she had collected. The universe was no longer silent. It had started taking notes. Later that night, she received a message. A number she didn't recognize. Just 3 words. "Your case accepted." She stared at those words like they were a lifeline. Because they were. A quiet, unstoppable, undeniable lifeline. Her shoulders straightened. Her eyes sharpened. Her breath steadied. This was not the same woman who used to whisper apologies for things she did not do. This was not the same woman who walked on eggshells in a house built on cruelty. This was not the same woman who had been taught to endure instead of fight. This was a woman reborn. I watched her pick up her phone and dial a number she had been terrified to call for months. Her voice didn't tremble. It vibrated with truth. "Hello, yes. I would like to report mental, emotional, and financial abuse. I have proof. All of it." And on the other end, the officer replied with something she had never heard before. "Madam, we are here to help you. Tell us everything." Tears didn't fall. Not this time. Her eyes didn't blur. Her throat didn't choke. Because finally, someone was listening. When she hung up the call, She didn't slump or break down. She sat straight, almost regal. A survivor turning into a strategist. That night, she didn't hide her documents under the mattress. She organized them on the table. Each page placed carefully in order, like puzzle pieces forming a perfect picture of their guilt. But the transformation didn't stop there. For the first time, she walked into the living room with her head held high. She didn't wait for their insults. She didn't flinch when her husband raised his voice. She didn't bow when her mother-in-law gave that mocking stare. She looked each of them in the eye and said, with a calmness that chilled the room, "Everything you've done will come back to you, not because I'm seeking revenge, but because the truth is finally awake." Her husband scoffed. Her mother-in-law laughed. Her sister-in-law rolled her eyes. But there was fear, a flicker of it, hidden under their arrogance. Because they had never seen her this steady, this confident, this silent. Later, when she went to her room, she locked the door with a new meaning. Not to hide, but to protect the future she was building. The next morning, the first official call came. A soft ring, sharp enough to slice through the false peace of that home. They didn't know who she was talking to. They didn't know why her tone was firm. They didn't know why she kept responding with phrases like, "Yes, I have the documents. Yes, the transfers were unauthorized. Yes, I have recordings. Yes, I'm ready to give my statement." But the unease in the house thickened like smoke. Her husband finally asked, his voice shaky beneath the pretense of authority, "What are you planning?" She turned slowly, looked at him, and replied in a whisper that was more dangerous than shouting, "I'm planning to stop being your victim." For the first time in years, he had no response. No insult. No threat. No justification. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew. The script had changed. Not in his favor. And the real storm was just beginning. The storm did not arrive with thunder or lightning. It arrived with a knock. A sharp, precise, official knock that echoed through the hall and froze every smirk in that house. Her husband opened the door with the arrogance of a man who believed law existed only for others. But arrogance evaporated the moment he saw the uniforms. Two officers stepped inside with calm authority, followed by a lady constable who carried a file, the same file she had built piece by careful piece. Her truth had grown legs, gained voice, and walked into the house dressed in legal power. "Mister," the officer asked. Her husband's throat tightened. "Why, yes. You are required for questioning in connection with financial misconduct, coercion, threats, and domestic harassment. We have the evidence. You will cooperate." The mother-in-law rushed forward, screaming, "This is a lie. She is doing drama. She is ruining our respect." But the lady constable opened the file, flipped a page, and read aloud. Unauthorized withdrawals. Recorded threats. Voice messages with abusive language. Medical neglect. Repeated mental cruelty. Each word hit them like a hammer. Their faces drained of color. Their legs weakened. Her father-in-law tried to intervene, puffing up his chest like he always did, but the officer stopped him with a single sentence. "Sir, interfering in an active investigation is a punishable offense. Step aside." For the first time, the man who controlled every conversation had no control at all. Her husband stuttered, We were just upset. It was a family matter." The officer cut him off sharply. "Abuse is not a family matter. Crime is not a private argument. The law does not wait for permission to act." The mother-in-law, who had spent years commanding fear, suddenly collapsed into pleading. "Beta, please forgive us. Tell them not to take him." And then came the moment she had earned, the moment every scar deserved. She stepped forward, her posture straight, her face calm, her voice steady as steel. "I will not stop the law." Her husband's eyes widened. Her mother-in-law gasped. Her father-in-law stumbled back 2 steps. The silence that followed was not weak. It was victorious. The officers escorted her husband out, while the neighbors peeked from their windows, witnessing the downfall of a family that once flaunted power like a weapon. The mother-in-law grabbed her own hair in disbelief. "What have you done? How will we show our face in society?" She turned to her slowly, deliberately, and responded with a softness sharper than glass. "You should have thought of society before you crushed your own daughter-in-law." Then she walked past them, not running, not hiding, walking like someone who had finally reclaimed her name, her dignity, her identity. At the station, her statement was recorded with respect. Her evidence matched every detail. Her timeline was precise. Her recordings undeniable. Her documents solid. When her husband tried to deny everything, the officer played the audio recording. His own voice filled the room, threatening, mocking, demanding money, admitting to things he never thought would be used against him. The moment the officer paused the recording, her husband's shoulders slumped. He was no longer the roaring lion. He was a trapped mouse. His lawyer whispered frantic instructions. He looked at her with fear, real fear, for the first time in his life. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply looked him in the eye and said, "You destroyed everything good inside me. But you did not destroy my truth. And my truth brought me here." The officer asked her one final question. "Do you wish to proceed with legal action?" And she answered without blinking, "Yes." And with that single word, the fate of every arrogant person in his family was sealed. Her husband was taken into custody. Her mother-in-law and father-in-law were summoned for interrogation. Their accounts were frozen for investigation. Their lies were documented. Their false pride shattered. For months, they had treated her like she was powerless. Now the law treated them exactly like what they were, predators cornered by truth. The next morning, when she stepped out of the police station, the sun felt warmer. The air lighter. The ground steadier beneath her feet. Justice had not just been served. Justice had been earned. She returned home, not as the woman who once cried in silence, but as the woman who rose in strength. The society that once whispered about her now bowed in respect. People who judged her now applauded her courage. Even strangers stepped aside when she walked, because dignity shines louder than noise. She didn't celebrate loudly. She didn't throw a victory party. She made a cup of tea, sat quietly by the window, and allowed herself to breathe for the first time in years. Her peace was the loudest revenge. Her silence was the strongest victory. And her justice was complete. And with that, the story finally finds its rightful peace. After all the suffering, after all the injustice, truth stood firm and justice prevailed. If this journey touched your heart or gave you something to reflect on, I would be truly grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is not just a button. It is encouragement, blessing, and strength for me to continue creating meaningful stories for you. Thank you for being here, and may peace and good health always stay with you.